Hey, I'm Matt Geiger. How do you get a moderate take on an issue like abortion where it seems like you must choose between two extreme poles? You're going to get that moderate take, and it revolves around 4 key values. The first and most important principle is to reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies. The abortion debate is traditionally between having an abortion and going through with an unwanted pregnancy. So why do we just accept that those are the two realities? That's just a given. Nobody wants more abortions. So why do we put all our effort into dealing with the consequences instead of just preventing them from happening altogether? The obvious solution is to make birth control more widely available, either by subsidizing it or making it available over the counter. Birth control is already available over the counter in lots of other countries, and there are fewer risks with birth control than lots of other over-the-counter drugs that we already have. The reason birth control isn't over the counter is because you need FDA approval for that, and FDA approval is expensive. Birth control isn't a big moneymaker to pay for that investment, and there are horrible incentives in our healthcare system where insurance pays more for prescription than over-the-counter drugs. There may be a convoluted way to make the system work right, but I don't see any problem with Congress just passing a law on a one-off basis to allow birth control over the counter, or at least paying for the trials to get FDA approval in this limited instance. I also would not be opposed to public funding of birth control, along with giving the government the ability to negotiate prices on birth control. I'd take that over both abortions and forcing women to have unwanted babies. The second principle is to stand behind facts and science. There is an incredible amount of misinformation on both sides of the debate, and a lot of times laws are based on that misinformation. I'm against any law based on lies, regardless of the ultimate impact. So how does this translate to policy? It means that I'm against laws that require doctors to give misinformation, like telling women that there's a link between abortions and breast cancer, having to tell women that there are long-term negative mental health consequences for women who get abortions, and having to tell women that the fetus can feel pain. These are all straight up false. Also, to promote a fact-based understanding of how abortion restrictions impact people, we need more federal data on women seeking abortions, especially the reason why they're getting an abortion, and the zip code that they live in, and the rationale behind wanting those zip codes is going to make more sense when I get to my fourth principle. But next is the third principle, balancing the liberty of the woman versus the life of the fetus. Now, this is going to be the contentious one, but to explain, I need to start by confirming something that's hotly debated. It is near unanimous among doctors and biologists that a new, unique human being forms during fertilization when a sperm and an egg meet, or at least a few days after that during implantation. In the technical sense, that single-cell zygote is a human being. From there, the typical pro-life argument goes that all human beings have the right to life, and abortion is killing a human being and should be illegal. But I think the vast majority of people know that that doesn't feel quite right. To be logically consistent with that pro-life rationale, first off, you can't believe in any exceptions for rape, incest, or fetal health concerns because you can't kill a human being for those reasons. Also, following the pro-life logic, you can't legally distinguish between an 8-cell embryo and an 8-month-old fetus. But that just doesn't feel right, and here's why. Our legal system gives and denies rights all over the place for a variety of reasons. A 15-year-old can't vote, a 2-year-old can't take out a mortgage, and the legal cutoffs we set have some rational basis, but they're largely arbitrary. Now, I freely admit liberty and property rights are significantly different than the right to life. But I'd argue that an 8-cell embryo is also significantly different than a newborn baby or even a fetus at 6 months. And the pro-choice argument doesn't pass the smell test either. I don't agree that the fetus is inside a woman, so she has free reign to treat the fetus however she wants. The pro-choice argument falls apart when you realize that the woman shouldn't have the right, for instance, to intentionally disfigure a fetus or anything like that, whether that's in the 3rd trimester or early in the pregnancy. It should ultimately be a societal trade-off of multiple rights based on values and a broader understanding of the situation. So where is that line, and what sorts of policy stances does that translate to? I think that each state has very different values, and so I think it makes sense that each state should set their own trade-off between a woman's right to choose and a fetus's right to life. That means that I'm fine with all state regulations, regardless of how restrictive they are, as long as they, first off, abide by the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court, and second, follow my other principles, helping bring down the number of unwanted pregnancies, aligning with the facts and science, And they're in accordance with my fourth principle, which is maintaining socioeconomic equality of access to abortions. A big problem is that a lot of abortion restrictions disproportionately hurt women who are struggling financially. The decision to get an abortion should not come down to whether or not a woman can afford it. I don't think that's right, and I don't think it's even good for society that the women who have money can get abortions, while the women who can least afford to raise children don't have that same access. From a policy standpoint, this means that I think public funding shouldn't be cut off for abortions. Publicly funding abortions is hotly debated, but that only really comes into play with Medicaid, which is health insurance for poor people. If Medicaid doesn't fund abortions, you create unequal access. I mentioned earlier that we need more data and statistics around women getting abortions, especially related to zip codes. There are lots of waiting period requirements and stringent regulations on doctor admitting privileges and hospital-grade abortion clinic facilities, which may make it a lot harder for poor women to get abortions. And if that is the case, I'd be opposed to any of those sorts of laws. If that's not the case, then I'm fine letting the state make that call, but we need the data to know that for sure. On a personal level, abortions really bother me, and my personal balance between women's rights versus potential of life would be for stricter state laws on abortion, but I understand that there are better, more intelligent ways to approach the problem in policy. It makes so much sense to focus first and foremost on something the vast majority of people already agree with, reducing abortions through getting birth control to whoever needs it. When you think about all our laws across all issues, we almost always have to decide as a society where to make trade-offs among competing priorities. This is the same. I understand that there's a lot of passion on both sides, though, and whichever side you take, at the very least remember that there are women who make very difficult decisions both ways, and more compassion for everybody would go a long way for both sides. Thanks for watching.